Camera modes. Before we get started, take note, this is an important bit. Let's look at the 4 main camera modes. You will find these modes on any camera that you may have in your hands, regardless of make or model. When you begin to take photographs, you will first set your camera to one of these 4 modes, and only one. They all do different things, but suffice it to say, modes 2, 3, and 4, as listed below, are all types of automatic mode where your camera will alter some settings for you to produce a properly exposed photograph. We can look at what exposure means shortly. Only Mode 1, Manual, lets you take over all the camera settings so that the exposure of a photograph will be your responsibility with no help from the camera's auto functions. We will look into the other modes and what they do later, so no need to remember them for now. This tutorial is being conducted in manual mode. This means you have full control over your exposure. We can look at what exposure means shortly. You will decide what your camera's settings will be so that your photograph won't be too bright or too dark. These are the 4 camera modes. 1. Manual. 2. Aperture priority. 3. Shutter priority. 4. Programmed auto setting. Choosing a mode. On most cameras, there will be a dial to choose the mode in which you are going to take your photographs. Here is the dial on a Nikon camera. Notice the 4 modes have their own little fenced-off bit. Recap. M is manual. A is aperture priority. S is shutter priority. P is programmed auto setting. We will discuss what is meant by aperture priority, shutter priority, and programmed auto setting later on. This camera is set in A, as you can see from the small white marker. You can only choose one of these 4 settings. All the other options outside the big 4 which can be chosen by turning the dial are features pertaining to that particular camera and are basically all auto settings that the camera will use to try to give you the best result it can, for certain scenarios denoted by the little icons. This saves you the trouble of setting the camera yourself. Or you could turn the dial to the green auto setting that you can see, and the camera will take over everything. But that doesn't mean it will always get it right, and it won't teach you anything about how to use your camera. It is worth pointing out that some cameras do not have a full auto setting. This is the dial on a Canon camera. The 4 main modes are still together, but they have different names, though handily, they are in the same order. Manual is the same on both cameras, it is just a big M. A, on the Nikon camera, aperture priority, is labeled as AV on the Canon camera, aperture value. S, on the Nikon camera, shutter priority, is labeled TV on the Canon, time value, which is what the shutter is for, as it controls time as we will see later. P, is the same on both cameras. Though they are labeled a bit differently, they mean exactly the same thing. Here is the Nikon-Canon comparison below. This is the dial on a Nikon D850. Well, it's not really a dial, is it? On this particular camera, there is a mode button. The way it operates is that you hold the button while you scroll through the same 4 options of M, A, S, and P, elsewhere on the camera. What we are saying is, even if selecting a mode is done in some other way, they are still the same 4 modes. Look on your camera to see where you can select these modes. What makes a photograph? John Berger, art critic, got it right when he said, "What makes photography a strange invention is that its primary raw materials are light and time." Light and time, think about that for a moment. The right amount of light for the right amount of time to get the right exposure. In the next video, I will introduce what is meant by exposure. Don't forget to subscribe.